At 0500 hours local time, the night over southern Ukraine was beginning to thin, the black sky slowly bruising into deep blue as 6 Ukrainian-made Beaver drones lifted off from concealed launch points near Kherson. Their destination lay to the south, a Russian airbase north of Sevastopol, a quiet strip of concrete hosting several rare and aging BE-12 amphibious patrol aircraft machines that had survived decades of service and, until this morning, every previous war. 12 kilometers away, a Tor M2 air defense battery was already awake. The radar operator saw the contacts bloom almost instantly. 6 distinct returns appeared on his scope, clean and unmistakable, moving steadily south. There was no confusion, no delay, no ambiguity. The Tor had done exactly what it was designed to do. 6 drones against 16 missiles. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. What the operator did not know was that the Ukrainians were not playing the numbers. They were playing time, geometry, terrain, and human attention. The first pair of Beavers climbed aggressively, electric motors drawing maximum current. Their ascent was deliberate and loud, not acoustically, but electromagnetically. To radar systems within 20 kilometers, they screamed. Reflections intensified, signatures sharpened, and warning receivers across the sector lit up. These 2 drones were waving their arms in the dark, daring the Tor battery to look at them. 30 seconds later, a second pair launched from near Berislav. These stayed low, hugging the earth at barely 100 meters. Their thermal cameras turned the night into a cold, grayscale world, roads glowing faintly, rivers dark and smooth, buildings pulsing with trapped heat. They flew straight south, indifferent, unremarkable, almost boring. The final pair did nothing at all. They sat on their launch rails, engines warm, batteries primed, waiting for a countdown that had been programmed weeks earlier by planners who understood one uncomfortable truth about modern air defense systems. No matter how advanced the hardware, the people operating them could only focus on so many problems at once. Inside the Tor command vehicle, the battery commander faced a choice that doctrine claimed was simple. 6 targets, 16 missiles. 2 missiles per target meant a 90% kill probability. Textbook. Clean. Efficient. But doctrine assumed cooperation. The radar picture shifted as the drones began to spread. The northern pair climbed higher, reaching 500 meters, bright and aggressive, practically begging to be engaged. The middle pair maintained their low, steady course, neither evasive nor provocative. The southern pair, once they finally launched, did something strange. They turned southwest, away from Crimea, away from the airbase, away from anything that made immediate tactical sense, unless you knew what they were really doing. The Tor's launcher rotated north, elevation motors whined. 2 9M338 missiles burst from their tubes in twin pillars of fire, accelerating to supersonic speed in seconds. Inside each missile, a guidance computer no larger than a smartphone began calculating closure rates, intercept points, and future positions, predicting where a drone flying at 150 kilometers per hour would be nearly half a minute into the future. For the first 8 seconds, the missiles flew blind, obediently following commands uplinked from the ground. Adjustments came in rapid succession: climb, level, slight correction left. Then the seekers activated. X-band radar flooded the sky. The northern Beavers had been waiting for that moment. Their radar warning receivers registered the change instantly. Pulse repetition frequency spiked from 300 to 1800 pulses per second. Search mode had become track mode. The missiles were no longer looking. They were chasing. Both drones dove. Not a graceful descent, but a violent plunge, trading altitude for survival in an instant. The missiles reacted, but they had been programmed for a high-altitude intercept. Now they were pitching down at 60 degrees, control surfaces shrieking as they pulled turns they were never meant to make. Enduring forces that bent metal and strained guidance logic. At 20 meters above the ground, low enough to clip street signs in a different world, the Beavers leveled out. Above them, two very expensive missiles encountered an existential problem. Their seekers, designed to isolate targets against empty sky, now stared into chaos. Every fence post, every roof, every puddle reflected radar energy. Doppler filters tried to separate movement from clutter, but at Mach 2.5, the missiles were moving too fast to make sense of the flood of returns. It was like trying to read fine print while sprinting through a library. 12 seconds after activation, both missiles gave up. Their computers declared the targets invalid and triggered self-destructs. The night flashed twice, harmlessly, above empty fields. Inside the Tor vehicle, the crew did not celebrate. They simply moved on. Attention snapped south. And that was the problem. The southern pair had vanished. Not physically. Drones do not teleport. But to the Tor's radar, they might as well have ceased to exist. The battery sat on a gentle rise, granting excellent coverage north, east, and south. To the southwest, however, a shallow valley carved a shadow into the radar's field of view. Physics did the rest. Terrain, curvature, and wave behavior combined to create a blind spot beginning 3 kilometers from the launcher. Ukrainian analysts had spent weeks studying satellite imagery and elevation data to find that gap. At ground level, it was 400 meters wide, narrow. Above 50 meters, the Tor could see everything. Below 30, trees and buildings interfered unpredictably. But between 30 and 50 meters, for exactly 400 meters of lateral space, the radar was blind. The southern pair slipped into that corridor at 35 meters altitude, flying by memorized GPS coordinates recited like prayers. A miscalculation of 200 meters, a gust of wind, and they would appear on the radar, like flares. They did not miscalculate. 3 years of war had turned Ukrainian drone operators into surgeons of the invisible. Threading needles through air defense networks was no longer remarkable. It was routine. While the commander searched for ghosts, the middle pair created a new problem. The assistant operator took initiative. 2 more missiles launched, this time programmed for low-altitude intercept. No climb, no elegance. These weapons accelerated horizontally, skimming toward the drones like predators at ground level. The Beavers detected the launch and did something no manual anticipated. They turned directly toward the Tor. Maximum throttle, diving to gain speed, straight at the launcher. It was not bravery. It was arithmetic. The Tor M2 had been designed to defeat cruise missiles, helicopters, and aircraft threats of the previous century. No one had imagined defending against consumer-grade drones attacking head-on. Every air defense system had a minimum engagement range, a bubble inside which its missiles could not safely arm. For the Tor, that distance was 1 kilometer. Inside that bubble, the system was helpless. The Beavers would reach it in 36 seconds. The missiles, already airborne, tried to adapt. Guidance computers recalculated furiously, attempting to intercept targets accelerating toward the launch point instead of away from it. One missile pulled so hard its control surface tore free, sending it tumbling through the night like a 100-kilogram lawn dart. The second missile faced a different problem. It was now on a collision course with its own battery. Safety protocols intervened. No Russian missile was allowed to endanger its launcher. 800 meters from the Tor, the missile self-destructed. The blast wave rattled the vehicle, a physical reminder of just how close failure could come. The Beavers flew on, electric motors humming softly. They had beaten one of Russia's most sophisticated short-range air defense systems without stealth coatings, jammers, or exotic technology. Just geometry, physics, and a willingness to think differently. But this was only the first layer. At 0517 hours, the 6 drones crossed into occupied southern Ukraine, and the sky became crowded with danger. A Buk M3 battery near Novokakhovka had been tracking them for 6 minutes, quietly following their heat signatures while the Tor fought its own battle. This was no ambush unit. This was a prepared position, commanded by officers who had been fighting drones for years. The book launched without ceremony. No search sweeps, no warning, just missiles in the air. These did not arc upward. They flew flat, horizontal, screaming through the darkness at treetop height. The book was using track via missile mode, turning the missile itself into a forward radar relay, extending the battery's vision far beyond ground limitations. The missile hunted and spotted simultaneously. The Ukrainian operators had 18 seconds to save their drones. One saw it first, a grain elevator looming ahead, a concrete monolith rising from the fields like an industrial mountain. The lead beaver dove hard, aiming for the narrow gap between the elevator and its loading facility. The missile followed until it couldn't. Designed to kill fighter jets, it was not built for urban obstacle courses. It detonated against the terrain, throwing smoke and debris skyward. 5 beavers emerged. One did not make it. A refrigerator-sized fragment clipped its wing, sending it cartwheeling into a field where it exploded in a small, bitter fireball. The book commander stared at his screen, expression tight. His system could track dozens of targets, engage 6 simultaneously, react in milliseconds. But the drones refused to behave. They crossed paths, actually crossing merging radar returns into a single blob before separating again. The computer struggled to maintain track identity, recalculating every time the formation rearranged itself. Each recalculation took just over a second. 5 drones meant confusion more often than clarity. Electro-optical backups came online, but pre-dawn haze blurred the picture. Thermal imaging worked only inside 8 kilometers. By the time the drones appeared as faint white dots, they were already inside the minimum engagement envelope. The book went silent. Not broken. Not jammed. Defeated. 5 UAVs continuing south, unable to engage due to technical limitations. Technical limitations. At 0535 hours, the survivors entered the domain of the S-400. This was the Empire's shield, designed to reach 400 kilometers to track objects the size of golf balls, to swat ballistic missiles from the edge of space. Its missiles could pull 20 Gs at Mach 14. Against drones, it was absurdly powerful and fatally flawed. A software decision made in 2007 had hard-coded a velocity filter into the system. Anything moving under 100 kilometers per hour was ignored as clutter. 3 beavers slowed to 95. To the S-400, they vanished. Contacts flickered, disappeared, reappeared in impossible places. The operator frowned, unsettled. But the S-400 never stood alone. Pantsir systems began repositioning toward Kacha Air Base. In 8 minutes, point defenses would seal the target. Then aviation intervened. At 0541 hours, a routine Russian military transport from Moscow began its descent towards Sevastopol, carrying 180 troops. Its approach path aligned perfectly with the Beaver's route. The S-400 could not fire within 5 kilometers of a friendly transponder. The drones tucked in behind the aircraft like ducklings, shielded by safety protocols and international incident prevention. For 8 minutes, liability became armor. Shouting filled radios. Demands to divert the flight met bureaucratic resistance. Pilots wondered why everyone was yelling. By the time calm returned, the Beavers were diving toward Kacha at full speed. The Pantsir arrived at 0546 hours, barely deployed, stabilizers half extended. "Forget the jacks," the commander ordered. "We shoot from the wheels." Accuracy dropped. Recoil rocked the vehicle. Missiles misbehaved. One veered wildly and self-destructed. Another found its mark, destroying 2 drones. The cannons opened fire, tracers stitching the dawn sky. But the Beavers did not fly straight. 800 rounds later, nothing had fallen. Then the first Beaver entered its terminal dive. Through a surviving thermal camera, an operator centered the BE-12. The aircraft sat motionless, golden wings catching the early light. The impact came at 40 degrees, 210 kilometers per hour. The shaped charge focused into a jet of molten copper moving 8,000 meters per second, slicing through aluminum, fuel, and into a parked tanker no one had bothered to move. The explosion rewrote the flight line. The second Beaver hit an Mi-8 helicopter moments later, igniting ammunition. Bullets cooked off in every direction, tearing into the Pantsir's radar and blinding it. The third circled once, recording everything, then dove into the final BE-12. By sunrise, the message was already spreading.